good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, or whenever you may be tuning in to the Growing Our Future podcast. We just love bringing the podcast to you. We love bringing on subject matter experts that are so willing to share their insights, their experiences, and give us tools, give us seeds. You know, our guest today, Kay, one of the things we like to tell people is if you want to know what the future is, grow it. Well, if you want to grow the future, you got to plant the right seeds. And today is just another opportunity to do that. And so today we're honored to have, this is a very unique interview, by the way, a professional parliamentarian. I want that to sink in. A professional parliamentarian, Kay Allison Crews. Kay, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
And Kay, are you a little bit familiar with the Texas FFA? Have you heard of us before?
I have heard of you before. I will confess I was not an FFA as a student. I lived in town and followed a different path at that time in my life, but have come to love working with FFA. I've served FFA now for several years as your parliamentarian, both in Texas and nationally.
Wow. Yeah, I bet a lot of people don't know that. So I bet a lot of people don't know that the subject matter expert behind the scenes is this lady right here. So now y'all know who she is. And I think you're going to be impressed when you hear her background. I think you're going to be impressed with her pathway to become a parliamentarian. And maybe the value in this is a career opportunity and something that you ought to look at as a student down the road. So, Kay, with that, we like to start all of our podcasts off the same way, because I tell you, if you turn on the news and you scroll through social media, it can get a little dark and it can get a little negative. But I think there's so many more positive things to be grateful for and to be uplifted about. And I like to start every podcast off by asking our guests, what are you grateful for today?
That's a great question. It's one I gave some thought to before we started this interview. First of all, I'm grateful for my health, because without health, so much gets so much harder. I've been a family caretaker for a number of years, and I'm fortunate that I'm the one that can be the one that takes care of rather than having to be taken care of. So that's the first thing. The second is education. Education is one of those things that you get and you gain, and no one can ever take it away from you. I had a fabulous education in public schools in Huntsville, Texas, where I grew up. And then through my university career, and as I've continued my professional career and continued to learn and grow. So education is one of the things that I'm really grateful for. And finally, I'm grateful for having great friends who support me in all of the adventures that life brings our way. So those are my three things I'm grateful for today.
That is great. I love it. I'm the same way. Think about it. Obviously, our family, our friends, the people that encourage us when nobody else gets it, the ones who can say, hey, keep going. I love my liberties. I love my job. I was talking to somebody earlier and we were talking about that. And I said, the thing about a job is maybe at the end of the month, you might have a little bit of money left over and you might be able to help somebody else because you do. So there's so many little things that sometimes we just fail to look at and say, I'm grateful to have that opportunity.
That's right.
Anyway, thank you for sharing what you're grateful for.
Sure.
And I hope that you continue to be blessed with health and friends and a professional career that leaves a legacy. So
thank you.
Keep doing what you're doing. All right, let's talk about, oh my gosh, Kay, your credentials. I'm going to have you go through your credentials. This lady right here has got these incredible credentials. I'm going to let her tell you what they are and kind of what they mean. So, Kay, tell us, as a professional parliamentarian, the credentials that you carry.
Okay. There are two national professional parliamentary organizations that are active in North America. The largest and the one most people may have heard of at some point is the National Association of Parliamentarians, and they're a great group. That was the first professional parliamentary organization I joined, and I now hold their highest credential, which is a professional registered parliamentarian. You get that through a series of written exams. To get a lower credential, you're registered parliamentarian. Then you get your professional registered parliamentarian by demonstrating your skills before a small group of your peers. Then I joined the American Institute of Parliamentarians, and that's their logo behind me. I'm a past national president, and these are their pins that I always wear when I have the opportunity to promote professional parliamentarianism. And from that organization, I hold the certified professional parliamentarian with an additional teacher of parliamentary procedure designation, which is that T that hangs off of the backside of that CPP. And that test, honestly, was a lot harder than the professional registered parliamentarian was. Took a 3-hour oral exam in front of a room full of my colleagues, with the first half on theory, comparing and contrasting multiple parliamentary authorities, and finally with about an hour of presiding over a mock meeting. And again, all of this was done in front of a room full of my peers. There are only about 50 people that hold both of these credentials, and I'm inordinately proud of that accomplishment.
Well, it sounds like they didn't just fall out of the sky. It sounds like you actually earned them.
Yes, sir. Yes.
How long would it take somebody to pursue those types of credentials to secure those?
I believe someone who started out cold saw this and said, man, being a parliamentarian sounds like a fun side hustle. And for a lot of people, it is. I believe that you can have your basic credentials, your certified parliamentarian, or perhaps your registered parliamentarian, depending on which organization you choose to work with first, probably in anywhere from 4 to 6 months. And then another year after that to earn your advanced credentials. So it's something that in the time of attending a junior college, you can spend that time in self-study and a few examinations and have professional credentials and an organization behind you that will help you market those credentials.
Wow. That's good to know. That's good. Okay. Well, all right. So you got these credentials. You obviously sought them. They became goals. You said, I want to pursue these. I want to accomplish these. So let's back all the way up. You talked about growing up in Huntsville, Texas. And all right, so we're on this life path. How in the world did you get to a point where you said, you know, I think I want to become a professional parliamentarian? How does that manifest itself and become a reality?
Partly, I grew up in a family that valued democracy. And parliamentary procedure is a lot about democracy, about fairness and equity and justice in meetings and in organizations. My father, Huntsville's a small town. My father was the president of the school board from the time I was in the 2nd grade until about the time I was a junior in high school. So almost my entire school years, he was president of the school board, and he would write speeches, he would practice. So I heard the language of parliamentary procedure, of processing motions routinely. And occasionally Dad would have a learning opportunity. What are we going to go do tonight? We could go bowling, or we could go to the movies, or we could go out to dinner. And he'd say, well, we'll take a vote. And so my sister and I would agree on what we wanted to do. And then Dad would explain that we were going to distribute the vote so that everyone would get 1 vote for every pound that they weighed. Dad was a 300-pound man, and so he outvoted all of us every time.
That is a great story. That is
Isn't that fun?
classic.
Isn't that fun?
That is great.
So that was how I first started. In college, I was a joiner, and I belonged to organizations there that used parliamentary procedure, mostly poorly, I know now, but didn't know then. And then when I was a young woman in a completely different field, I was in healthcare for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
My mother called and said she had been elected national president of an organization, a women's organization that she belonged to, and she wanted to take me with her to her national meetings in Washington, D.C. And all I had to do was go and make her look good, help her out, carry things, organize stuff, and she would pay for it all. Well, I was young and broke, and free trip to Washington sounded pretty good to me. So off we went, and I got to hear her again presiding, the language of presiding, running meetings, being a gracious presider. Even now, when I preside over meetings, the voice I hear in the back of my head is frequently my mother's, because she was such a gracious presider. And that was, in a women's group, that was very important. I find it's helpful in a lot of other groups too. Being nice is never a bad plan.
I agree.
Yeah. So I liked the little group that she was the national president of. Even when she was no longer able to go, I continued to go. A friend of mine got to be national president, and she said, I asked them to put you on my board, and they said you were too young and they wouldn't do it. And so I'm going to make you my parliamentarian. And I said, but Marianne, I don't know anything about being a parliamentarian. She said, Kay, it's a book of rules. You're a smart girl. Go read the book. And so I did.
Wow.
I took a class at the University of Wisconsin. It was a continuing education course in parliamentary procedure. I now teach that class because I found so much value in it. And so it's an online thing, so it's real easy. But I love that. And that's what started my journey. And I wanted to do a good job for my friend. And so that's really when I started practicing and learning. And the way life happens, sometimes I had the opportunity to decide to try to pursue this as a full-time career. And now parliamentary procedure is my career. It's how I make my living.
Wow. Are you still involved with the University of Wisconsin?
I am. I'm the teacher for their course called Dynamics of Leadership, Introduction to Parliamentary Procedure.
Wow.
So there you go.
So just a side story, just because we're talking, my next door neighbor, my kids all grew up, our kids were all the same age. So all of our kids, we all grew up together. But my next door neighbor, my oldest son, he grew up with a young man that was quite an athlete named J.T. Barrett. And he was the quarterback at Ohio State University. And I actually brought an ex-congressman. We went up to Madison and watched the Badgers and Ohio State play. And I'm going to brag on your university for real quick, because it was awesome. I don't think I ever have heard a stadium singing the national anthem as loud as that stadium was the day that I was there for that football game.
Oh, that's bad.
The pride. I mean, I even wrote a note to the university and told them, I said, I've been all over. I got to tell you, you guys are doing something right, because it was a very proud moment to be a guest and see this incredible spirit and an incredible football stadium, by the way. And the campus was beautiful. The food was great. Everything that we enjoyed ourselves.
Nice. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I will tell you a funny secret. I've never been to Wisconsin.
Really?
I took a class there. I have since become an instructor there. I've never had to go. We've done everything online or remotely. Back in the day when I took my correspondence course, I typed out my things on this electric typewriter and mailed them off, because that was how you did correspondence courses back in the day.
That's
So,
great.
yeah.
I've been remote for 22 years. I live in Wichita Falls in North Texas. My office is in Austin. And, long before COVID hit, you learn how to utilize technology and good communication and being attentive, and it works. And I think the COVID situation taught everybody that you can operate in this environment. So
That's right. That's right.
awesome. So what in the world of a parliamentarian, and I'm sure there's not anything, quote, normal, because I'm sure every organization is dealing with things that provide a little different twist on your role. But what might it look like to be a parliamentarian? If you were given a job, what might that look like when the call comes in, and then how you execute?
So the first thing that I will tell you is no one ever calls a professional parliamentarian because their meetings are going so well. There's always a problem. We didn't elect somebody right. We've got a secretary that refuses to turn in the minutes. We've got, people who behave badly in debate. We don't know how to hold an election. Oh my gosh, we've got a pandemic. We can't have our meetings. Are we allowed to meet electronically? And if so, how do we do that? The role of parliamentarian can be as narrow as going to a single meeting, sitting next to the president and helping them preside when they ask questions. I find those jobs kind of boring, honestly. Or they can be quite expansive. Some of my clients have expanded my role far beyond things that a normal parliamentary role would involve. I may take the minutes. I may be their head teller. I may be involved with developing their policies and procedures. I may do board training of various types, some of which is probably parliamentary in nature, but some of which is not.
Sure.
So there are a lot of things that you can do and take this knowledge and expand on it. One of the things that I tell my young friends at FFA who I meet, and I do work with the National Parliamentary Procedure Competition, which I find just the most fun thing ever. Everywhere you go for the rest of your life, there are going to be meetings. Decisions are going to have to be made. Having all the tools in your toolkit to make those decisions effectively, for people to think that you are fair, to know about decorum and debate, and to know how to disagree without being disagreeable, knowing how to take notes or provide minutes of meetings. Oh my gosh, that's always how I start with a new group, particularly if I'm a member. I start out volunteering to be the secretary. I learned so much. And it's an easy job, really, once you kind of learn the basics of it. So that's some of the very best advice that I share with young people who are thinking, well, maybe this is okay to do.
Wow. So let me tell you how right you are. So let me share an example. So I grew up, I know Mr. Maynard, Mr. Tom Maynard. So
absolutely,
Tom and I both grew up at Cal Farley's Boys Ranch. And so as a freshman, I'm from Dallas, and they put me in ag science education. I didn't choose to be in ag. They put me in ag. And as a result of being put in ag, they put me on the Greenhand Parliamentary Procedure team. And I had to learn how the meeting flew, how to flow the meeting, the minutes, the committee assignments, and move a motion, pass a motion, amend a motion, all the kind of basics of doing this task of running a meeting. And over the course of 4 years, I obviously had more opportunities to do that. I became the area president, went on to become the state FFA president. So I had all of that experience, which then when I went to Texas Tech and got elected to the Student Senate, then they put me as the parliamentarian in that role. But where this became real evident to me of what you said was when I moved to my community, Wichita Falls, back in 1988. One of the first things that I did was I went through a program called Leadership Wichita Falls. And cities across the country have these leadership programs where they try to bring professionals in, give them tools to equip them to serve their community. And I'll never forget, one of the very first sessions we did was on board training. And I watched these leaders in the community fumbling around on parliamentary procedure that I had learned as a freshman in high school many, many years ago. So to your point, one of the things that we share with the kids is think of it this way. There are over 3,000 high schools in the state of Texas. Every one of them are going to have graduating classes. Every one of them are going to have somebody that is going out trying to get a job, a scholarship, or an opportunity. The question is, what is your competitive edge? What separates you from the competition? And Kay, I may be wrong, but I'm going to tell you, I believe that a command of parliamentary procedure and understanding that beautiful word a while ago that you used called democracy, I think it's a competitive edge.
I agree. I agree. And democracy is a huge concept.
Sure.
And there are lots of folks that we no longer teach how to handle huge concepts all the time.
Yep.
But we do frequently teach skills that you may need to know. You got a student senate election and you got to have some help in running that sucker fairly. I can help you. You need minutes taken for this board meeting. I'm your girl.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of skills that we package together in this thing we call parliamentary procedure. And you say parliamentary procedure, and there are many people in the world whose eyes glaze over and roll back in the back of their head. And they are like, oh my God, the most boring thing in the whole world, go away. And it can be. I know some of those people kind of are here. But if it's something that you find interesting, I have learned about things through the course of this job I never would have thought about. I've worked with labor unions and political parties, elevator repairmen.
Mm.
Who would have thought they needed parliamentary procedure? They have a professional organization, and I'm much more grateful to them. Every time I get in the elevator, I look for the inspection thing now because I worked for them for a couple of years. This has been a wonderful opportunity. And I think young people, as they're going out in the world, whether they're going to a college or whether they're going out to work or to a vocational educational school, there are going to be lots of opportunities where you can find people who need the skills that you can bring.
Well, I think it's a unique skill, by the way, and I think it's one that is, I'm going to use your term earlier, toolkit. So when you have these skill sets in your toolkit, you're going to be able to take advantage of more opportunities. You're going to be able to solve problems. So the more skills you have in your toolbox, the more chances you may have to be successful. Thus, you have a competitive edge. Another story real quick that I think you'll get a kick out of. There's a company out of Lubbock, Texas called ICEV. And CEV Multimedia is one of the largest online curriculum providers in the United States. Their owner just made a significant contribution to Texas Tech University, largest gift ever in the university. But I worked for the company when they first started. So I actually have 7 tapes in their inventory. But one of the tapes that I tried to convince the owner to do back when I first started was a fundamental parliamentary procedure tape. And he didn't really want to do it at first. He kind of fought me, and we went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I said, we don't need another FFA tape. We need to take the jackets off. Let's just do a fundamental par pro tape so that a local Lions Club or Rotary Club or Civic Club could pick it up and in 30 minutes have a basic outline of how to operate a meeting. So finally talked him into it. They did it. And it went on to become one of their #1 bestsellers.
Bet it did.
And
Bet it did.
Because it's just that simple concept of exactly what you've described is the decorum. It's the democracy. It's how do we let voices be heard? I tell you, if you want chills, it gives me chills. When you look up in a dictionary, the opposite of democracy, we lose words, by the way, like fairness. Those words are lost because outside of democracy, outside of a voice, in a controlled environment, if you will, we lose the beauty of dialogue. We lose the beauty of allowing somebody the right to vote for somebody or to vote for something, or to have a voice in that democracy.
Correct.
So I just want you to know, I really appreciate what you said earlier, because I am a fan of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But that means the people, we have to be informed. We have to know how to participate. We have to be willing to step up and be engaged.
Yes.
Just like your dad, to say, you know, I'm going to serve my community through the school board or serve on a committee, to do something to contribute in a positive fashion to an organization. But all of those things are things that you just described.
True.
So let's drill down into some of these, because I'm curious.
Okay.
So in your career, let's start with what's probably, you don't have to name organizations, but where have you seen something about to fall apart where there was a real need for parliamentary procedure?
In a number of places. Right now, I seem to be getting a lot of calls from local governments, city councils, particularly in very small towns, where the dialogue has become so untenable that they need someone to come in and coach them on how to debate. And honestly, that's what I spend a lot of my time with them on, is you don't all 5, 7, 9, however many, have to agree, but you have to be able to present your points without talking evilly about each other. Just because you disagree doesn't mean that, they're descendants of the devil over there. We don't all have to agree, but we do all have to try to get along. And so that's one of the things that I'm doing a lot of right now, is working with, like I said, particularly fairly small civic governments. And small towns are too small to have that kind of divisiveness in their local government.
Is it as simple? Can I ask a question about that? Is it as simple as setting a framework to say, okay, we're going to have this discussion and we're going to allow X number of people to be for it, X number of people to be against it, and we're going to limit the dialogue to 3 to 5 minutes per presenter. And we're not going to talk over one another. We're going to allow the other person to express themselves. Is that kind of the structure that you try to bring to the table?
It is. A lot of times I go back and talk about kindergarten and the kindergarten teacher that has the talking stick. And you don't get to talk unless she hands you the talking stick, and then you can talk, but you have to give it back to her. And I sometimes have a little stick that I carry with me, and I make them pass it around if they're having trouble with that. And it's a silly funny thing, and you can teach adults anything, but you better have a good sense of humor if you're expecting them to learn it. Because grown-ups don't like being told that they don't know everything in the whole world. So doing the talking stick and then getting indulging our inner kindergartners. Ooh, he talked without the talking stick. And it really reinforces that. Certainly time debate, the concept either of going around the table in a small group with 5 or 6, that's probably just as effective as trying to balance pros and cons, and making sure everybody gets an opportunity to talk, so there are all kinds of different rules out there, different tools, but a lot of it is basic decorum. And sometimes we'll practice. So I'll go in and I'll have, a motion. We are going to talk about what silverware we're going to use. And you 3 people want the gold silverware, and you 3 people want the silverware. And we're going to debate this. And we practice. So I come up with something that absolutely has no reality to it, and make them practice debating. And they can't talk about each other. They can only talk about the motion. And that becomes a really helpful workshop for them to learn the structure of how to debate without getting a lot of content dragged in and accidentally stepping on an issue that you don't know exists in the town. So that's one thing that I do. But sure, we talk about time limits and number of times to speak and rotating pro and con or going around the table. Is it unfair to call the question if you're the first person to debate on the motion? Robert says you can do that. Doesn't feel terribly equitable to me. Doesn't feel fair. So does it feel fair to everybody else? And if it's your motion, it probably feels just fine to you, but otherwise, maybe not. And so, we talk about, okay, so maybe we won't call the question until we've gone around the table one time, or until, and particularly with elected officials, that seems to work really well, allowing everyone to have a single time. At the National FFA convention this year, we had a rule that you could not call the previous question until there had been, I believe it was 5 or 10 minutes of debate. And oddly enough, the delegates voted it out. They said, nope, we want the right to do this whenever we can muster the required 2/3 vote to do it. I was like, okay, it's whatever you want to vote on is your rules or your rules. So,
well, I think here also, when we take what you just shared and let's put it in the context of our state legislature in our U.S. Congress, what you just shared, you probably ought to know what the Rules Committee is.
That's right.
You ought to know what calendars are, because there's a lot of things that you just shared that are germane to the way bills and policy moves through our system.
Absolutely.
So that's really good insights. I appreciate that very much. So so give me an example of something that you saw that was done very effectively at a meeting. What would be something that, again, you don't have to give names, just an example.
Sure. One of the most effective things that one of my very largest clients did, largely on my advice, was they started adopting an agenda.
Really?
Yeah. They had an agenda, they published it, but they didn't formally adopt it. So then they didn't necessarily feel like they had to follow it. And there was no way to enforce following it because it wasn't an adopted thing. So I said, well, let's adopt the agenda. This is an easy fix.
Wow.
And that's been probably almost a decade ago that we started doing that. And it's helped their meetings immensely. Because now, yeah, we know what we're going to do. We know what order, we know what time. Now, my hard part is they've become so beholden to their agenda that if they want to do something different, this is a small board with 20 members, and we're all present in the room. And they're like, well, do we have to amend the agenda to take up this item before that one? I'm like, does everybody agree that we want to take up this other item first? Well, yeah. I'm like, then why are we going to go through the pro forma making a motion to amend the agenda if we've all agreed that this is what we want to do? There are times when parliamentary procedure is a great tool. There are also times when there are faster ways to do things and just as efficient and just as fair to members' rights.
Yeah. Ross Perot back in the day, Ross Perot was fond of saying, if you see a rattlesnake, just kill it. You don't need a committee.
That's right.
You know,
That's
to your point, there are some times that you see systems get drugged down and bureaucracy take place where it didn't necessarily need to.
Correct.
But
Correct.
that's fascinating that you said that just an agenda could be a difference maker in effectiveness of the meeting.
And it really has been.
What's the largest board of directors that you've ever dealt with?
I've dealt with some boards of directors that were way too big, you know, a member from every state, from various regions, and all of that. The largest organization that I've dealt with, as far in terms of delegates, was a large political convention with several thousand people.
Delegates.
State political convention with 9,000 delegates.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Yeah, we always have these debates about board sizes and effectiveness and all that. That's the reason I was asking that question.
Sure.
What?
And I will say, larger boards are hard to maintain their effectiveness simply because you put 50 people in a room and you cannot keep from having sidebars. People aren't paying attention. They're talking to each other. There is almost too much dissent to be able to arrive at high-level strategy to move forward.
I agree with you. At that size, you can't navigate the conversation to the strategic, exactly what you just said, to the strategic purposes. Right. Because it would be overwhelming. The dialogue, it would take you days just to go through the dialogue.
Right.
So, all right. So a fun one. Let me ask you this. What's one of the funniest things or one of the funnest things you've seen in your role as a parliamentarian?
I was working for a state political party. It was a third party. And they were in a conference room that was really long and skinny. And we were at the head table in the middle of it. But I mean, the people on one end could barely see the people on the other. Mm-hmm. And as tends to happen in political groups, the people who liked pink were on this side, and the people who liked purple were on that side. And so when we took voice votes, all the pink people only heard pink, and all the purple people only heard purple. And every single vote, someone was calling for a division. We would have to, and the chair then would say, well, it's really clear, but their rules said that the division would be counted.
Mm,
Oh my gosh, what a horrible, horrible rule.
mm.
And I said, horrible, horrible rule. Oh no, we've always done it that way. It's never been a problem, Kay. It's like, yeah, okay,
Wow. What
all
a
right.
story.
So we have this horrible situation exacerbated by horrible rules. And the president looked at me and he said, we're never going to get out of here in time. We're going to lose the convention hall before we can close the convention. I said, yep, sure enough. Should listen to me, sir. That's really what I'm thinking. But what I said was, okay, so let's do something creative. He said, what's that? And I said, have the pink people send one of their leaders up, have the purple people send one of their leaders up, and they can stand behind you, and only they can call for a division because they'll see the same thing you do
Oh,
from the
yeah.
front.
Yeah.
And so if neither of them call for a division, then
Hmm.
the team knows that it was right. We didn't have another division called the entire meeting. It worked great. And it was just a creative, out of the box. Oh my goodness. How do I save my client from themselves?
That is a
Um,
great story.
but that was
Huh.
that's one of the funnest things I ever just kind of came up with.
One of the fun things you're talking about object lessons for leadership development is we can take a beach ball, with the various colors and like number it 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then get somebody to stand in the middle of the room and put it on their head, and then ask people on that side, what number do you see? Ask people over here, what number do you see? And then, like, is exactly what you just described. Then you ask the poor person with the ball on their head, what do you see? And they say, I don't see anything. And it's exactly what you're describing
That's right.
in the environment of how do you solve something that you don't have real clear communication on.
Right.
You got to try
Right.
to find a way to gain that clear communication.
And I'm going to tell you, there isn't any book that solution appears in because it was, yeah, just a combination of things.
Mm.
And that to me is one of the most fun parts about my job is, we get into these crazy situations and how do you figure out the best way to solve them for the client?
Well, and that's why years of experience, institutional knowledge, examples over time, they lend themselves, uh, professional networks, all of those things lend themselves to those challenging opportunities.
Absolutely.
All right, Kay, let's talk about leadership development for students real quick and teachers. If you were going to give, based in the world that you live and operate in, if you were going to give them 3 leadership skills, 3 techniques to students or teachers and say, you ought to be able to do these things, what would you say they are?
Preside with confidence.
Mm.
And honestly, confidence covers everything, not just presiding. Make your motions with confidence, amend them, debate with confidence. I was a judge at the national finals for the parliamentary procedure contest. And some of those teams had great debate because they stood up, they threw their shoulders back, and they believed in what they were telling us.
Mm. Mm.
And it was confident and it was well presented and well phrased. And so that's a huge leadership skill. And it's one that is true whether you're going to be a professional parliamentarian or you're going to be an ag judge, a dairy judge somewhere. Man, do it with confidence. Um, Another leadership skill that I think people need and teachers and students all could use is a little humor. I think that you can win almost anything with goodwill and good humor. You talked a little bit before we started recording about using a book called Canons.
Mm-hmm.
And Cannon talks in his book, Cannon's Concise Guide to Parliamentary Procedure, which is still in print, talks about the importance of developing goodwill with your audience, or if you're presiding, with your assembly. And one of the ways he says to do that is through humor, and through being willing to allow the other side to win every once in a while.
Wow, that's good.
Thank you.
We've the foundation board. We have 3 different boards within Texas Team Ag Ed. So you got the Ag Teachers Association, you got the FFA, and you got the foundation. And the foundation, folks, is pretty much made up of all corporate leaders. And we have one that used to be the CEO of La Quinta, and he was absolutely notorious that there was going to be humor in every board meeting. And he would break up the meeting by having something that just made everybody stop and relax for a moment.
Yep.
I thought that was good. All right, that's 2. One more.
The other is learn to take good notes. Minutes, notes. You are always going to need written records of what happened. And learning to do that quickly and efficiently, and with good punctuation and proper spelling and all those things, is a life skill that will again serve you no matter what you choose to go do. That being able to communicate effectively in writing.
Okay, I've got a whole page of notes here. You have just done wonderful. Be a gracious presider, be a confident presider, humor, good notes, goal setting. I think that through your testimony, you've talked about that, achieving things. You've got to see them before you can achieve them. I just can't thank you enough for taking some time and visit with us.
Oh, I've loved doing it. I have loved doing it, and look forward to seeing you around sometime soon.
Well, so we always wrap up with a fun question.
Okay.
So here's my fun question for you.
Okay.
What is the best concert that you've ever been to?
Oh gosh, this is almost embarrassing, but it truly was such a great concert. And I've been to a bunch of them. Barry Manilow.
Really? I would have loved to have seen Barry Manilow.
And now I'm going to tell you, this was a long time ago. I was back in college.
Wow.
And he came in. There were costume changes, but it was high energy, and it was fun, and it truly still was, just a great concert.
I'm telling you, you've got my mind. I'm hearing Mandy. I write the songs, the Copacabana. I could imagine just how he was he was an entertainer.
Yes.
I can only imagine. Oh, that's great. Well, I will tell you that that's the first vote for Barry Manilow. That, guess what? He needs a vote. So, because I'm with you. I tell people, if you were to ever open up my music list, you would find Barry Manilow in there. You'd find Michael Bublé, and you'd find Jimmy Buffett and George Strait and Bruce Springsteen, because I'm the gamut. I love just great music and great entertainment, and Barry Manilow was one of them. So
absolutely. Neil Diamond was another one that put on a fabulous concert.
Well, I tell you, when he did the Coming to America, that genre, it was huge.
Yes.
Wow. Well, Kay, thank you so much for taking time and joining us for the Growing Our Future podcast. There's a saying that's attributed to Abraham Lincoln. And he said the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. And so I always tell people, if agriculture's taught me anything, it's taught me if you want to know what the future is, grow it. Well, to grow the future we want, we've got to plant the right seeds in the minds of the young people that will one day take our roles. And we need them. And another one, Kay, is they say the essence of leadership is to plant trees under whose shades you may never sit. And the fact that you're willing to share with us and to share with our students, I think that you probably planted some trees today. And that's got to be a good feeling. And it's an honor to have you on. For all the people watching, as we always say, if you want to know what the future is, grow it. That means you got to plant the right seeds. You got to nurture them. You got to take care of them. It takes hard work. It takes a little faith. But guess what? If you do it all right, one day you're going to wake up and there's going to be an opportunity in front of you, not just for you, but maybe for your family or maybe the people that follow in your footsteps. But it happens because you grow the future you want. Thank you for joining us for the Growing Our Future podcast. Until we get together again, everybody be safe, have fun, and make a difference in the world. Thank you.